But first, joining us from our Canberra Bureau is South Australian Liberal Senator Cory Bernardi. Senator Bernardi, is the Coalition being reckless in urging the government to wind back the stimulus spending?
Well, good afternoon, Helen. The Coalition has been responsible in urging the government to use caution and to be mindful that they are sentencing to an entire generation of Australians a debt burden unforeseen or hitherto not seen in this country.
But what about the Treasurer Wayne Swan's argument, and he was just meeting with the G20 over the weekend, that to do so at this stage would risk the economy?
Well, Treasurer Swan will say anything or do anything to suit his argument. The simple facts are that Australia entered into the global financial crisis in a much stronger position than any other of the G20 economies. And as such, we don't need to stimulate our economy to the extent that other nations have had to. It's now time, with economic growth on the uptick, it's now time to reassess the spending. It's to assess how wasteful it's been and be mindful that we are the custodians of our economy and our nation for future generations, not just for the life of this Parliament.
Senator, should Ken Henry make an appearance back before the Senate Economics Committee?
Well, I've heard the calls about to get Ken Henry to appear before the Senate Economics Committee. The Coalition, of course, is considering the wisdom of that approach and will make a decision accordingly.
It seems like a pretty good idea, doesn't it, to do that?
Well, at some levels it might be appealing, instantly appealing, but as a Treasury official, we would expect Mr Henry to defend the Treasury decisions and the advice given to government. What we need to do is to ensure that there is a thorough examination of the existing expenditure and the proposed expenditure so that a good decision, the most appropriate decision for Australia's future, can be taken.
Senator, you gave a speech, I believe, in South Australia on Friday night, in which has been interpreted as attacking your leader, Malcolm Turnbull. Why would you attack Malcolm Turnbull at this point in the election cycle? Shouldn't you be supporting him?
Well, Helen, my speech was actually in New South Wales, and it actually had nothing to do with leadership or attacking any individual. What I was referencing was an essay that I wrote some 2 years ago, which is part of a broader approach to conservatism and conservative politics for the future of Australia. And I referenced that on a number of occasions. There was nothing whatsoever untoward in it. It really was about taking a conservative and responsible approach in Australia's long-term interests.
So
a position, might I add, that is reflected in our demands for a fiscal conservatism and responsibility.
So what similarities do you see between Malcolm Turnbull and Sir Robert Menzies?
Well, there's been a transition from Sir Robert Menzies right through into the Howard government, and indeed continuing under Malcolm Turnbull, that there are some core issues that the Coalition supports and believes in. We believe in lower taxes, we believe in smaller government, we believe in the freedom of the individual, all the things that are under threat by this government and previous Labor administrations. And my speech and my writings are really a call to arms to say, look, Conservatives cannot allow this government or any other government to get away with it. We need to reinforce in the public mind the importance of these principles and these virtues and these values, because they are important to the rest of Australia. The Coalition is 100% united in this.
It would be true to say, though, that there are concerns amongst your colleagues and the people you're most aligned with about the direction of the Turnbull leadership. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's fair to say that at all. The Liberal Party needs two wings. We have a conservative wing, we have a progressive wing. But those wings have to be bolted onto a fuselage. And the fuselage, quite frankly, is the core values which were manifested in our party in its inception and have been continued through over the last 50 years. That's what I'm advocating, that we should be reinforcing those to the public, because they are the messages, they are the conversations that people have around their dining room tables. They're the values that they think are important for Australia. They think they're important for their children, and we need to reinforce that at every opportunity.
Why would you therefore raise Malcolm Turnbull's position on the Republic in that speech, and how he claimed that John Howard had broken the nation's heart? Why raise that at that point in that speech?
Well, I raised the issue in a synopsis, I guess, of the translation of the values from Sir Robert Menzies to John Howard, and I merely said that John Howard should not be regarded by anybody as having broken the nation's heart. He should be regarded as an individual that spoke to the very heart of the nation. And I strongly believe that. I believe that Mr Howard and Mr Menzies and Mr Turnbull all reflect the core values of the Liberal Party. And as such, we need to make sure that we reflect them in everything that we say.
It's therefore fair enough for Imre Salazinski and the Australian to interpret those comments then as criticism of Malcolm Turnbull, isn't it?
No, not at all. I don't think so. And no one who was at the speech has ever suggested to me that that would be the case. What I did was reinforce what we have in common from the Liberal Party when it was conceived under Sir Robert Menzies, that translated through the various leaderships into the Howard government and continues on today. These are the things that unite Liberals and unite Conservatives across the country. It's about the need for smaller government, lower taxation, individual responsibility and individual opportunity. These are messages that are timeless. They resonate with the Australian community. They're things that I endorse strongly. I know Mr Turnbull endorses, and I know that many, many other Liberals do too.
Senator, do you think Mr Turnbull's doing a good job as leader of the Liberal Party?
I do. I think we're actually starting to make some inroads now against this reckless government and their debt and their spending. It has been a spendthrift government that has really had no concern for the long-term consequences of their action. And as such, the Australian public, wherever I go, wanting to raise the core issues of how are we going to repay this debt? You know, will my children be repaying this debt for the next generation? Will we be able to afford it? The only way this government can pay off its debt is either to fuel inflation, which is a robbery basically of every other individual in the country, or it's going to have to put taxes up, or it's going to have slash spending. All of them unpalatable, all of them unnecessary if we had a prudent approach to our economic resources. This government is reckless.
Can I just change the subject briefly and ask you about a report this morning that Minister Anthony Albanese ignored a whistleblower that turned up in his office in regards to security at Australian airports. Would that happen in your office, or do you have some sympathy for to Anthony Albanese's office and the staffer who met with Mr Kessing?
Well, it appears that Mr Albanese has just dismissed, someone who's brought some very significant information into his office. Is that an appropriate course of action? Hindsight would say no, but it indicates, how dismissive and how arrogant I think this government is when they really are not interested in the facts and the truth. What they're interested in is the spin. In our office, and I know in many other offices, we take these sorts of things very seriously. We take them with as much responsibility as we possibly can, and certainly there's not a constituent of mine who I would think would say that I've been dismissive of them. I listen to their concerns and I try and act upon them, as I know do many of the coalition.
Senator Cory Bernardi, thank you very much for joining Playing Politics.
Thank you.